Hi Year 10, this is your video for how to redraft your speech, which is what I'm going to be asking you to do in today's lesson and tomorrow's lesson, or next lesson, I think it's Thursday, on your new timetables. So before I can take you through how to redraft your speech, I just want to take you through, first of all, how you're going to be marked on the way you deliver your speech. It's important that you take that into account when you're redrafting, because the redrafting stage is where you really need to start focusing on how you'll deliver it and how you can kind of help yourself by making little notes in the way you structure your speech. Some of you wrote your speeches in quite large blocks of text, and we need to start thinking now about breaking that up and how it's going to help you present it, because you do need to be making eye contact with your audience, for example. So I'd like you to do your notes on how you'll be marked on the delivery in your pink book, please, your language book. Isaac, I'm sorry, I obviously still have your book, so please just use paper. If for whatever reason you don't have your pink book, then just write it on line paper and put it into your language folders, please. You should have a separate section for your spoken language. If not, just put it in your non-fiction writing, because that's where you should already have some notes on speeches anyway. All right, let's get started. So this was the mark scheme again, which you should have seen in the video before Easter. It is on this channel if you want to go and dig it out if you missed that video. So there's 4 elements that are affected by your actual delivery of the speech, and these are the 4. Your use of spoken language, I'm not necessarily going to sort of ask you to take into account when you're redrafting. You've all used standard English when you've written it, obviously, because you're great writers, but obviously that's going to come from practice. You're going to need to rehearse, you know, speaking the words naturally, because it's easier to write in standard English than it is to speak. We're going to have a look at how you can use a range of effective strategies to engage the audience in your delivery, and also how you need to kind of go about the Q&A section as well. Okay, so pink books at the ready. I'm going to give you now 10 golden rules for delivering your speech, and then I would like you to jot these down, and then I'm going to take you through how therefore I want you to plan your redraft. So the first thing, obviously based on the fact they have to be audible, is that you need to be clear, well paced and heard. So don't mumble, also don't shout. But the most important thing is that you can actually be clear and be followed, so we can actually trace what you're saying. We know when you're using full stops. We know when it's the end of your sentence. You know, if you're getting angry, then you might speed up. If you're really trying to emphasize something and how awful it is, then you might slow down. You can use fillers such as that's absolutely fine. That is a natural thing that people do. Oh, there you go. Even Obama uses fillers, and he's a fantastic speaker. So please don't be afraid of doing that. It doesn't mean you're not going to get a distinction just because you're using a filler. You do need to maintain eye contact with your audience. You cannot, I probably should have written this down, you cannot read your speech from a piece of paper. You will not pass if you do that. It is a very clear expectation from the board that you will have learnt this speech, that you'll be comfortable standing there with notes rather than an A4 piece of paper. You will need cue cards, but I'm obviously not expecting you to make cue cards during lockdown. So it's really important that you keep eye contact with your audience and actually engage with them. You cannot stand at the front of the room and hide behind a piece of paper and get a pass, which I think is absolutely the right call by the exam board, because it's a really important life skill to be able to look at the people you're speaking to. Right, if you make a mistake, you're not going to panic, because that's fine. It doesn't have to be flawless. You just simply say, sorry, let me start that again. Or something similar to that, whatever you're more comfortable saying. You just sound professional then. You just sound like you realise that you've made an error, you want to start again, and you're helping the audience to follow what you're saying. So that's fine. You need to pause at important moments. So give the audience time to digest. And this is quite difficult. I mean, coming from me who speaks at 1,000,000 miles an hour, if you really want to emphasise something that important, or that, you know, your core message, don't be afraid of just pausing for 2 seconds either side. Now, when you're stood there at the front of the room, that can feel like a very long time, but actually it's important the audience aren't going to trail off or start clapping thinking you've finished. They will be thinking about what you've just said. And if it's something very powerful or meaningful, then that's brilliant. And that's part of delivering your speech in a really effective way. And if you ask a question, then pause after it, because you're going to need them to think of an answer. Whether you want hands up or whether you just want them to think about it, you still need to pause. You also need to raise your pitch at the end of the sentence to show that it's a question, because they can't see your piece of paper with a question mark on the end or your cue cards. So, for example, do you want to come to the shops? Shall we go out? Why are these such naff questions? Do I really have to do my speech? So the last word should be a little bit higher, so we know that you're asking a question. You need to, well, you don't need to, but it's a really effective way if you want to be moving towards distinction. Lower and raise the volume of your voice to reflect your emotions. Don't be afraid of really sort of, acting a little bit. If you're talking about something that's really sad, then lower your voice, bring the audience into you, be more emotional and intimate about it. If you're angry, get angry, raise your voice, show them how frustrated you are by this disgusting inequality or whatever it is that you're speaking about. Emphasize the first word of each sentence. I think that's important because it helps us to follow your speech and it makes it very clear. So that's something you can practice doing, but I want you to take that into account in your redraft, and I'll tell you how in a bit. Number 9, also emphasizing keywords. So I suppose this is similar to number 5, where you're pausing at key moments. It's similar, but then I'm asking you to emphasize keywords. For example, it is absolutely disgusting that this is happening, for example. There is nothing, absolutely nothing better in this world than ice cream. So I'm emphasizing nothing and absolutely nothing. So again, you're just engaging, you're using your voice. That is a relevant strategy to engage your audience for that mark scheme. Well, for the tick on the mark scheme. Right, in this question and answer at the end, this is where it gets a bit harder, because obviously you're not able to pre-plan your exact sentences, but you do need to show that you're listening by whoever's asking you the question. Don't stare at your feet or look at your notes or look at your PowerPoint or look at the ceiling. You need to look at the person asking you the question. So you might want to look thoughtful, the thoughtful emoji face. You might want to smile towards them. You might want to just nod to show that you understand. Absolutely do not be afraid of saying, sorry, can you repeat the question? Because when we're nervous sometimes, we're smiling at someone and taking it in and we're nodding, but actually our brains are thinking, I'm really nervous and I don't know what you're going to say, and we forget to actually listen. That's fine. That's just human. So just say, really sorry, could you repeat the question? You can also say, can you clarify this question? You can also say, can I just check? Are you asking me blah, blah, blah? Okay, so don't feel like you have to launch into an answer. If you can't think of an answer immediately, then what you can say is, oh, that's a really interesting question. Let me have a think. Now, obviously, if you're thinking for 30 seconds, that's going to be a little bit tedious. But give yourself a good sort of 5 to 10 seconds. That's going to be fine. No one's going to pressurize you. And that's actually really good practice for interviews, because it's actually really bad advice to just waffle and start answering interview questions without thinking first. So absolutely fine. Step back, have a think, organize your thoughts. People will wait. People are patient. Okay. Yep, that's it. So they are your 10 golden rules. Okay, so based on all that, I've had a think about what's the most effective way to redraft your speeches with all that in mind. So today and tomorrow, I'd like you to do the following things. Sorry, I keep saying today and tomorrow because I'm used to having you all the lessons on the run. This lesson and next lesson. As I've said, I don't want you to be copying your speech onto cue cards at this time. We're going to wait until lockdown's over, or whenever you get close to presenting them, which, might be before the summer, but it might be before Christmas now. We'll have to see. Not sure. But I don't think, I think that putting them onto cue cards, in a couple of weeks before you present them is actually a really useful activity to get your speech in your mind. So hang fire on that. What I do want you to do is, number 1, I want you to make any corrections or rewrites on the document I've sent you back with my feedback on it For some of you, that's going to be really quick. You've just got a few spag errors, a few suggestions. For some of you, it does need a little bit of rewriting in terms of developing your speech, or working on your structure and organisation, or making your audience clear. I think they were like the 3 key EBIs across the class. So obviously you need to do that first, get your speech improved, ready to actually go. And then the rest of what I want you to do is focus on preparing yourself to deliver it. So I would like you to add on in brackets specific stage directions to help you deliver your speech effectively. Now, some of you have already started doing that, which is fantastic. So you might have pause in brackets, you might have raised voice, you might have, I don't know, look at the ceiling in disgust, anything at all that helps you to direct how you're going to deliver it. This just needs you to sort of step back and imagine yourself presenting it and how it'll be effectively presented based on those 10 rules. You might want to actually deliver your speech to either your friends via video or to a family member, and that might help you think about, well, where do I want to emphasize things, where do I want to direct myself, what could I do at that moment to make it more interesting. Likewise, I'd like you to highlight in bold the parts that you'll emphasize. So that is the first word of every sentence I want you to put in bold, so it stands out and it makes you pause before you say it. And then any other keywords or phrases that you really want to emphasize, put in bold as well, or you can underline them as well if you want, or put them in a different color. It's up to you as long as they stand out for you on the page. Plan which parts of your speech you're going to emphasize. It'll just help you. It's one last thing to have to do off the top of your head while you're presenting, because you'll know exactly, it'll be written there in bold or color, different color, etc. This is why as well it's really important that your spag is accurate, because if you've not got the full stops in the right places in your work, then your sentences are going to run into each other and it'll be really hard for us to follow as an audience. Okay, what I'd like you to do is every time you're going to pause for effect. I don't mean pause after a full stop. I mean pause, to really emphasize something. I want you to start a new paragraph, because that will really help you visually to pause and wait when you kind of practicing your speech. Now, when you put it onto cue cards, it won't be a new paragraph, it'll be a new cue card. But for now, I think that's a way of you helping to separate your speech out so you know the different sections really clearly. Okay, so that's in terms of redrafting your speech, your actual speech. That's what I'd like you to do. Then I'd like you to prepare for your Q&A. And once you've done this, you are ready to go. I know you'll still need to practice delivering, and I know you'll have to make your cue cards, but you're absolutely ready to go on these speeches whenever the time comes. So your option 1, which is my favourite, to prepare for your Q&A, is to work collaboratively. So you could, for this option, go onto Microsoft Teams and let the class know what your speech is about, and ask them to tell you what questions they'd ask you. So you could even attach your speech to the discussion board, like I was attaching pictures. There's just a little attach sign underneath your discussion panel. Now, this is a great option because you're going to get loads of different questions, hopefully, if you all help each other out. But also, these people are actually in our class and they're going to be in the room. And when you finish your speech, they could ask you those exact questions. So I think if you're particularly nervous, or you'd rather really like pre-plan for the Q&A, then this would be a really good way to do it, because you're going to be getting almost like a preview of what you'll be asked. And I'll also join in with that as well and offer some questions up. Your second option is you could present your speech to someone in your house and ask them to give you question suggestions. 3, you could try and just guess what people will ask if you really don't want to present it at this time, got enough going on, fair enough. Or option 4, you could read your speech aloud to your friends, send it them as a video and ask them for suggested questions. Now, whichever option you choose, I don't mind. I'll keep an eye on Microsoft Teams for the next couple of days in case you are doing that one. I do recommend it. I think it's the best one. Regardless which one you pick, I want you to plan your responses to these questions. So that might need a little bit of research depending on the questions that you're asked, or just thought about what you think, and if you got any evidence to support it. the more detailed your answers are to these questions, the more likely you are to get a distinction. If you can't really engage with the questions, you're not going to pass. If you engage with them and just give simple answers, then you'll get a pass. Then that's a sign of a pass. But merit and distinction, you need to be given a bit more detail. And distinction, I think, is really about the intelligence with which you reply and the thoughtfulness. And for example, you can still use anecdotes or persuasive techniques in your answers, and you can plan to do that as well. So it's definitely worth spending time thinking about that. I do think the Q&A is the biggest distinguisher between a merit and a distinction sometimes. Okay, so that's all I want you to do. And just as a reminder, you do have an example distinction speech on Show My Homework under Easter homework. I'm pretty sure I said it on the 2nd of April. It was the last day of last half term, of just before Easter. So please go and watch that again if you think that'll help you. Now, once you've done this work in the next 2 lessons, that's it. You're done. You can kind of like box it off. Your speech is ready to go, and that's hopefully give you a lot of satisfaction. And I've already said I'll give you time to practice and make your cue cards. Right, just a couple of minutes to take you through the big picture. So by the end of this half term, which is Friday, your speeches will be ready to go, which is fantastic and brilliant. And I'm really, really proud of you for getting that done, even remotely, because I realised that obviously it's not as ideal as being in the classroom together. Your poetry anthology will be annotated. Obviously, apart from the 4 poems, we'll leave until year 11. If we get time, we'll come back to them at the end of the year, but I'm not sure that we will. And also, you'll have had a chance to practice your comparison essay skills, which are really important because it's the essay that students lose a lot of marks on. So what that means is that we've really boxed loads of stuff off this half term. So thank you so much for all your hard work and working with me to get that done. It does put us in a really good position for year 11, despite you know, the rubbish circumstances. So next half term, just so you know, I will say, first of all, obviously you'll be getting feedback on your comparison essays, and I might do a couple of lessons bridging gaps of skills and how to structure essays, etc. We'll see how you get on. But our main focus after half term is going to be back on language. So we're going to be focused on how to write articles and letters. If we have time, we'll look at reports and guides, but neither of those have come up on the GCSE yet, so I feel quite confident that leaving that till revision time in year 11 is not the end of the world. But we'll see. If we have time, we'll get to it. And we'll also be covering reading paper 2, which is, for example, the prisons paper that we did last year. Now, if you remember, you did paper 1 reading already. I can't remember what text we did. We did the Ruby paper. No, Megan, the girl who left a suitcase on the doorstep in London. Oh no, we did Robbie and Emma. Anyway, all that work where we had to like answer the how questions and the Q+I formulas and all that stuff. It's very similar. Nothing's particularly new in this reading paper, so nothing new to worry about there. Okay, I will stop talking to you. I hope you have a lovely half term, and as always, just ask me if you've got any questions on how to redraft your speech or what it needs to look like. You don't need to submit them unless you want to check anything with me, but do let me know you've done it so they're ready to go. Okay, have a lovely half term. Bye guys.